What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over another episode in our Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series. In this episode we're going to be going over random, so we're going to be going over random character selection and random stage selection. So if we start up our game here, you'll see I have a third box now for a character, so I have my mannequin, and then I have my second mannequin, and I can switch their colors, whatever. I have this third box now, where if I select it, it just displays this question mark. You can see that I have random selected here in this box as well. So if I am to continue, I also have a random button on the stage selection. So I have my first stage, my second stage, and then random again, which displays random here as well. So I can pick random for both, and then we're going to get, we got the first mannequin in the first stage. But if I am to close the game, and we'll do this quickly. Let's do this again. If I get random both times, we got the second character in the second stage. And let's do it one more time and see what we get. We get the second character on the first stage. And so we can use this random button, and we can set other things, like if we want a random character and a set stage or a random stage and a set character, we can do that as well. So we can mix and match. We're going to have random for both those options, and then it's going to carry over to what we do in the game, what we have control over, and all of that good logic. So before we get started today on how to accomplish this, I want to let you know that this is part 43 of the Super Smash Brothers and Platform Fighter tutorial series. If you want to get caught up, I'll leave this iCard in the top right corner of the video. Right here, it's to the entire playlist, so you can see everything we've done to this point and how we've gotten here. Alternatively, if you just care about the character selection and the stage selection, I'll go ahead and link you to this episode right here, which is where we first set up the character selection screen in this tutorial series. Alright, with that said, we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to want to go to our character select screen and stage select screen widgets today. So I'm going to go to my blueprints, functional BPs, widgets, menus, and I've got character select screen and stage select screen. Alright, once I'm in my character select screen widget, you can see what I've got here. So I had my two buttons before, as well as an image on top of them. And that way I could look at the button and put an image essentially here where we could see it on the button and know what character we're selecting. Well, I'm going to do that same logic for random on both the character select and the stage select. So we can go ahead and set this up now before we get into any of the actual blueprint logic. And so what I did is I copied my character 1 button, character 1 image, pasted it under the same canvas panel, named it character 3 button, character 3 image, and then set the parameters that I wanted. So for character 3 button, you can see everything I have. You don't have to make it exactly like this. This is just what I am doing for it. So I have the standard gray button. I have not applied any sort of style to it. I then have my character 3 image here. So for this, I have a question mark that I've imported into the game, or into the project. Just looks like this. It's just a picture. When you import it, it will import as a texture, so it'll look like this, but it's really just a picture. And so just like the other logic in here, I set the image to be the image I want, and here are the rest of the details for my character image. So this is really simple. I've just put this here just like I would any other character, and the same thing goes for the stage. I have stage 3 button, which looks like this. And I have stage 3 image, which looks like this. Scroll up to the top for you. Looks like this. And I have my question mark in here. The rest of it really is the same. It's the same as the others. So I'm not really going into a lot of depth with this. And also I haven't changed a lot with this. But be aware, if you want the image to appear on top of the button like I have here, and you don't want the image to have collision, make sure on the image itself, you go down to behavior, and visibility should be not hit testable right here. self and all children. What this means is we can see it. It's there, taking up space. However, we cannot click on it. It's not something we can activate or the player can activate. So it's just there. That way we can press directly through it and reach the button. Make sure you do that on both the character select and the stage select, just like we did for the other buttons and images, but it has been a while, so in case you forgot, make sure you set that up. Now once we have these in here, we can actually go into the logic that we want to accomplish. And so what we're trying to do is, if the coin is on the random selection, first of all, we want to bring up the random image on the little player selection here or the overall stage selection here. But then also we want to perform the random function to figure out what character or what stage is given to the player when the game loads. So once we get off the menu. So let's start with our character selection screen and let's scroll out for a second. Now we have event construct, which is not going to be changing today. So this logic is going to be the same as it was. Some of it got a little ugly with the 5.0 update. The size of nodes changed, so might want to clean this up a bit. Just notice that. But otherwise, we're not going to be changing anything in event construct, but we have this grab coin, and this is when we press the space bar, we can grab the coin, and then we can use it to change where we're landing. Well, when we release the coin, okay, we were calling determine coin placement, and we were determining where the coin landed. So in determine coin placement, we determine, okay, we're within these set of boundaries, so we're this character. Or in stage select, we're within these set of boundaries, so we're on this stage. And that is the current selection. All right, so if we go into determine coin placement now, you can see this is how it was set up. And it does look like there's a lot going on. There's actually not too much going on. There are cleaner ways to do this. And when we get more characters and more stages, we may implement one of those ways. It would be the same method here that we have, but instead of copying this logic and just changing the button that we're doing, we could pass in the button. It's a little more complicated than that, though, because it's not just about using that button. We do have to worry about a few other things when using that method, so I'm ignoring that for now because this method works fine. It's just a little bit ugly because there is a lot going on, but don't be confused. Basically, this section that we had for the character 1 button and this section we have for the character 2 button are still good. Okay, they're not going to change at all. But I am going to add a new section here for the random button, of course. And I'm also going to add a new parameter to this function so that we can return it and do different logic if the selection is random. So either click on the function call here in the event graph. If you're in the function, you can click on the very first node, determine coin placement, or click on the function over in the functions section, determine coin placement. So in determine coin placement, I scroll down to my details panel and I look at my output parameters, and we have coin placement and it's got an eCharacter class because it returns a character class that we want to set in the event graph right here. This way, if the coin remains on that spot, this is the character that will be spawned when level loads. All right. And so we had that as an output parameter, but we want to click the plus and add a new output parameter because we want to determine if this is random or not. If it's random, you could either determine what character the player is going to be right then and there, or you could wait until the game loads to assign that. I've decided to wait till the game loads so they don't know going in. That is why we have to display the question mark here as opposed to just picking the character and then assigning the picture here. So I could pick random and it would be mannequin 1, then I'd take it off and pick it again and maybe it could be mannequin 2. But I don't want the players to be able to know what character they're going to be when they're on random until they get into the match. So if you're following that logic like I am, then what you want to do is have this boolean is random, and we're basically going to override some of our logic if it is random to ignore some of the things that we don't want to do under those circumstances. So once you've added a new parameter and set it to a boolean called is random, you're ready to continue. Now notice that the return nodes that you had in here already will have this parameter, but you can leave them as is. They are not random choices, so we do not need to check is random. However, like I said, I've added a third condition. So we have our first character, and it goes into a branch. And if that is not the selection we're on, we go to the second character. And then that goes into a branch, and this was empty. Only the true was going into a return node. But false, so if we're not on the first character or the second character, we're going to go to the third check. We are going to determine if the coin has landed on this third option, which is the random option. So what I did is I copied my logic from button 1 or button 2, and I pasted it. Because you can use literally all the same stuff, except for character 3 button. You have to use that before, if you copy it from here, it's going to be character 2 button, or if you copy it from the first one, it's going to be character 1 button. But we have to make sure that we're using character 3 button. So you can just go ahead and make sure you get character 3 button in here, get it, and then pass that into the slot. I did describe this in depth when we were making this, but if you want a quick explanation of what all this is, basically the button has a slot on the widget. That's what they call these. They call these slots in the hierarchy here. And so this slot is tied to position and data that it has stored inside of it. So we can get both the size and the position to determine if the coin is within the bounds of this slot, this image in this case, or this button really. So that's what that's doing. But that's the only change you have to make. You just copy this, and now I'm leaving the next branch false out because I don't have a fourth character to select. But the true is going to call a return node, just like the other ones did. But I'm going to make sure that I check is random. Now, if I check is random here, we will basically ignore the coin placement selection here because this is trying to set the character enum off of where the coin is placed. But we know it's placed on random. We don't want to manually set an enum. So it doesn't matter what you set here. We're not going to use this coin placement on this final return node. We just want is random to be true. Now there's something else I do in here as well called determine random character. And you won't have seen this before because we just added it in this episode. So we have to go and set this up and call it before we return out of this function. We can go ahead and do that now. So if you go to functions and add a new function, I called mine determine random character. This is what mine looks like. It doesn't have any input or output parameters. Once you make it, you can double click on it to enter it. And essentially what we have to do here is we have to figure out what the random value is so we know what character to assign to what player. But also we only want to set it in the game instance reference. That way if we start the game, we can begin the game with the player not knowing the character that they are. We don't want to set it, specifically set the image and everything that's going to give it away now. We just want to set the value in the game instance, so the actual spawn character is that random value. So we can go ahead and use the random integer node that Unreal has for us right here. And it is a value between 0 and max minus 1. Okay, so I have two characters that I can select right now. So max would be 2, but it's max minus 1. And it's from 0 to that value. So I want a max of 2. Let's do a more complicated one. Say we have 5 characters. So if we have 5 characters, we have index 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. That is 5 values, index 0 through 4. Because of this, we want our max to say 5 at that point. Because if we had 5 characters, we want it to go through 0 to 4. Whereas, like I said, this node right here returns a value between 0 and max minus 1. So if we give it 5, 5 minus 1 is 4, which would mean this would give you a value between 0 and 4, which is exactly what you want. All right, that's how you get the value here. And then we're going to bring this directly into a switch on int. Okay, and once you get this, you can click add pin to get more than one of these. At first, you'll start with just the default. You need as many characters as you have in your game. So as many pins as you have characters. So I've added 2 pins, and I'm utilizing the default as well. And so what this is going to do is based on the value this returns, we're going to do a switch statement, and then we're going to set the character's class, the character skin, whatever it is that we want to set. Okay, so if it returns 0, that is my first character. So I want to get my game instance reference, which is set up in the event graph early on, right here. So I have a game instance cast, and I set a reference to it so I can use it later. Happens in construct. All right, you've set that up if you've been watching the series, so no worries, just reminding you. We're going to use our game instance reference. We're going to grab our players array, which keeps track of all the player data. So it is going to keep track of things such as their name, the selection of the skin, the character that they actually are, and a few other things. Okay, so we're going to get that value. We're going to drag off our game instance reference, get players right here. It's an array. And we want to get, in this case, we don't have multiplayer menu support yet. We will be adding that, but we don't have it. So we're just going to always assume it's player 0 doing this until we get that data. In which case, it's pretty easy to update. We can type get, and we can get a reference. We want to get a reference because we're actually going to want to set members on this value. So we want to make sure that we are setting the appropriate values on the appropriate element, not just a copy of the element that's not actually in the world. That won't help us here. So after you do your get node, you can leave it at index 0, and we can drag off of this and type set members, and it'll be set members in the structure that you have. So we want set members in player details. Now actually, let me do this and show you what it looks like. So when you do this, it might look like this at first. And this is because the set members in player details doesn't have any of the pins selected by default. You're supposed to check the pins here in the details panel that you're going to want to change. Now don't click them all, because if you click them all and you don't plug something in, for example, if I leave player name in here and I don't put anything in, it's going to override player name to be empty. Okay, so you only want to use the pins the pins you're going to change. So I'm going to disconnect player name, but I'm actually going to randomize the skin with my random selection as well. So the outfit of the character, and of course the class. So I want to have both my skin and my class connected. So that's what I've done here. Now for the class, I know that this is coming off the index 0 here of the switch. So I can select my first character, which is my standard mannequin. I have another random integer here, and this is our outfits for each character. Now, right now I don't really have outfits for characters. I do have that little setup where you can click on the character's image and it will change their image color. But I don't have a full set of outfits for any of the characters. I don't have the same amount of outfits for any of the characters. So this is more just planning for the future. However, if you do have skins or outfits in already, then this is super easy. What we're doing here is I'm also randomizing the skins, so I'm just grabbing the same random integer and passing it in. I am doing a different random integer node. This is important because I don't want to use the same value necessarily. Okay, if I drag off this and put it in character skin, then say I select character 2, it's also going to be outfit 2 every time. I want these to be different values potentially. So I can get character 2, but I might be able to get skin 1. Okay, so I do another random integer, and I pass that into character skin. Now, the alternative to index 0 here is index 1, which is the second mannequin, but I do the exact same logic. It's just that the character class is manually set to mannequin 2 instead of mannequin. Okay, so I select my second character here. Default, I bring it into the top branch, but it doesn't matter. You can default it to anything you want. I would recommend a default. In case that random somehow returns a value that's not expected, you will still get a character at least, and the game won't crash or bug out. All right. And then right now, like I said, we don't have a way to determine multiple players on the same menu, and so because of this, there's no reason to try and set brushes for these other character sections yet. So what I do is I bring both branches into this one node, and I just set the brush to be the question mark. It's hard-coded, yes, but because we don't want to select, we don't want it to be based off the character that is actually currently assigned by the random value because the player is not supposed to know that. So I grab our player 1 character image right here. And once I get that in the screen, go ahead and search for set brush. Get this here. Then you can right click on the in brush and hit split struct pin to get a bunch of variables that you can set. I actually leave everything alone except the in brush image I changed to my question mark. Quick note, because I didn't mention it earlier, but the buttons, the character 3 button, you'll want to make a variable. The image, you don't actually have to, but you can do that as well. And then same for the stage selection. Make sure the button is a variable, and feel free to put it on the image as well. At this point, we actually have our random value. This is what set our random character. And then this is what is setting the question mark to be the icon the player can see. So it looks random to the player, and then it also is assigned a real random value. What we have to do now is go back into determine coin placement and call this function before hitting the return node. Alright, so just call the new function you made where you're going to return. Just make sure you do it before it, and it will get those random values for you. Now remember we had this is random added. This is because when we go to the event graph, what we were doing is after determine coin placement, we were automatically setting the character to this data, and then we were setting the brush of the character images. But again, we don't actually want to do that here. We want to leave it as the random, the question mark. So all this logic after determine coin placement, I'm now skipping if it is random, not doing anything at all. And so if you drag off is random and add a branch, then you can do the logic that you were already doing if it's false. Otherwise, don't do it. And that way we won't override the logic that we just did in the random function. Alright, now with that, we're actually good with the character select. The stage select is quite similar, but it is not exactly the same. So let's go into the stage select. Let's go into the graph on this one. So, yet again, event construct is basically going to stay exactly the same. It has this grab coin that we use to determine what stage we're on in the determine coin placement function. Okay, so it's very similar. So basically, determine coin placement looks like this because we had 2 stages. So I had stage 1, then I have stage 2, and now I have stage 3. So just like before, everything for stage 1 is going to be the same as stage 2 except stage 1 button. Everything for stage 2 is going to be the same thing as stage 3 except stage 2 button. So you can go ahead and copy one of these other sets of logic. Alright, and you can go ahead and paste them in here. And just make sure you change out stage 2 button to be stage 3 button. Right, clean it up as much as you see fit. And now what we have to do is make sure we follow the same rules as before, where we determine if it is a random selection. Even though the logic isn't exactly the same, we do still want to do the same thing for what stage that gets selected. When it's random, we're just going to display the question mark, so we want to override the data that we're setting in the menu and showing to the players when random is selected. So in determine coin placement, if you click on that, go to your output parameters, add a new one, you can get a Boolean, and you can call it is random. Again, you're going to have your coin placements on your return node, so you can leave them alone, and then you'll have this new is random Boolean in here. The first 2 can remain false because they're not random selections. The third one is the random selection, so we want to mark it. The coin placement won't matter because we're going to ignore it if the result is random. Instead, what we have to do is make a determine random stage function, and then go grab the value and set the data appropriately in there. So we're going to go to our functions, add a new function, and I've called it determine random stage. So if we go into determine random stage, this is what it looks like. It's actually simpler than the character one. In here, we still use random integer, and it's the same math as before. So I only have 2 stages right now, so my max happens to be 2 yet again, which means I'm going to have an index of 0 and 1, and I'll have the default. So I'm going to do a switch on my random integer. If it is index 0, I go to my first map, which is the default map. If it is index 1, I go to my second map, which is the training room. If it's default, meaning it doesn't fall under either of these, I just set it to the default map. Then I grab my selected stage image, which is this right here. And I do the set brush on it. Right click on in brush, split the struct pin, set the in brush image to be the question mark. Alright, so now we've selected a random value for the stage. This current stage selection is just a variable within the stage selection widget. But it's going to be really useful when we're loading the stage to know exactly what was selected. So we want to set this here so we have that data. But remember, we don't want to overwrite everything we did based off the result we get from this function. So going back, now that we made this function, make sure you call determine random stage before calling the return node in determine coin placement. Okay. Now go back to the event graph, and you'll see that this is the same as the character select, essentially. We had the current stage selection that we were setting based off the return from determine coin placement. Then we were doing a switch statement on it to set the appropriate picture, but we don't want the players to know what stage they're going to before it loads. So we don't want to overwrite our logic that we did with the question mark with this logic. So we want to drag off the is random, go to a branch, and only if it's false do we want to do any of this logic. We've already set current stage selection in determine random, so we also don't have to do that again. So you can just skip everything if it is true, and you'll be good to go, because when the stage is loaded, it checks this enum and opens the appropriate level. Alright guys, and that's pretty much all I've got for you today. I do have one additional fix that I think is worthwhile, because it was pretty ugly before and you couldn't really read it. You might have noticed earlier in this episode you were able to read my text fairly well. When I updated to UE5, the text, I don't know if it was the defaults of the text or something changed within the widgets, but the actual text, the font, the size, the color, everything looked worse in UE5 when I was trying to type within the default text box here. So you could barely see it all when I was typing anything in the past. If you'd like to fix this like I did, it's very simple. You can actually go to the text box directly. I've got 4 of them, so you can go to any of them or all of them. You can then scroll down to font and then change everything that you see fit. So for me, I had 8 as the font by default, which was actually fine in UE4, but in UE5 it was incredibly small. So I changed it to 24, and then I gave it a little outline size of 2, just like I like to do to give it that little black outline. So there you go. It's a super simple change, but now I can actually type in here, and like I said, you can see it, because I knew that I was typing, and I could barely see it in this box, so I think it is worth mentioning. Alright guys, but I think that's all I got for you today, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon members and supporters. Thank you guys for going the extra mile to throw support my way. I am so incredibly grateful, and you guys are awesome. Thank you so much, guys. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my series, or any of my episodes from any of my series, then feel free to join the Discord community. There is a link in the description. It is completely free, and I'd be happy to assist you. Anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.